Cornfield's curse. I never believed the stories about the old Whitaker farm. Growing up, kids whispered about the cornfield. How people who wandered in at night never came out. How their screams carried on the wind but never reached the road. Some said the land was cursed. Others claimed something lived in there. Something that watched from the stalks, waiting for anyone foolish enough to step inside. I used to laugh at those stories. Then, one October night, I learned the truth. Started with a dare. Bet you won't do it, Mike grinned, nudging me with his elbow. We were parked just outside the old Whitaker farm, the massive cornfield stretching out under the moonlight. The stalks were high, easily 8 feet, and swayed gently in the breeze, whispering against each other. Mike, Jake, and Lisa sat in the bed of my truck, passing a cheap bottle of whiskey between them. The plan had been simple: hang out, drink a little, and scare ourselves with ghost stories. But then Mike had to open his mouth. "Come on, Aaron," he pushed. "Just go in, walk to the scarecrow, and come back. 10 minutes. Tops." I smirked, shaking my head. "You guys seriously still believe in this crap?" Jake chuckled. "All I'm saying is, no one ever makes it to the scarecrow." Lisa shivered, pulling her hoodie tighter. "My uncle used to work for the Whitakers before they left. He said they found something in there. Something that scared them so bad, they abandoned the farm overnight." Yeah, I rolled my eyes. "So they left because of some evil cornfield monster? Come on, you guys can't actually believe." Mike tossed me a flashlight. "Prove us wrong." I hesitated, looking at the field. The entrance was a dark, gaping maw between the stalks, a tunnel leading into the unknown. The scarecrow stood in the center of the field, visible only during the day. At night, you had to find it. The wind picked up, carrying a dry, whispering sound through the stalks. I swallowed hard. Then I clicked on the flashlight. 10 minutes, I muttered, stepping forward. The moment I entered the cornfield, the world changed. The laughter of my friends faded behind me, swallowed by the dense rose. The air grew thick, heavy, like the humidity before a storm. The stalks loomed taller than I expected, closing in from all sides. I kept my flashlight trained ahead, illuminating a narrow dirt path winding deeper into the field. I walked quickly, my footsteps crunching over dead leaves and husks. The only sound was the rustling corn, shifting with the wind. Or at least, I thought it was the wind. A snap echoed behind me. I froze, whipping the flashlight back. Nothing, just endless rows of corn, stretching into darkness. I exhaled sharply. "Calm down, man. It's just a stupid field." I pressed on, quickening my pace. The path twisted and turned, leading me further into the maze. My friends were right. I should have seen the scarecrow by now. But the deeper I went, the further away it felt, like the field itself was shifting, stretching, trapping me inside. Another snap, closer this time. I spun again, heart pounding. The corn was still silent, but I wasn't alone. Something was watching me. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Mike? Jake? You trying to scare me?" No answer, just that damn whispering, circling me like a distant conversation, too soft to understand. I turned back and kept walking. The path narrowed. The corn stalks grew closer, their dry husks brushing against my arms. My flashlight flickered, and then I saw it. The scarecrow. It stood at the center of a small clearing, slumped against a wooden post, its head tilted forward. The body was made of burlap, stitched together in crude patches. A wide-brimmed hat covered its face, casting a deep shadow over its features. Something about it felt wrong. I exhaled sharply. "All right, found it. Time to head back." Then the scarecrow moved. I swear, just a twitch, a slight shift of its head. The whispering grew louder. I stepped back, my breath coming in short gasps. Nope, I'm done." I turned and bolted, but the path was gone. There was no way out, just walls of corn in every direction. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I heard something move. A heavy dragging sound. I swung the beam back to the scarecrow. It was closer. I choked on a scream. It had moved, no doubt this time. It was inches from where it had been, its head now fully raised. And I saw its face. It wasn't burlap. It was skin, stretched too tight, stitched together in places where it had torn. The mouth was sewn shut, the lips twisted into a grotesque grin. The eyes, God, the eyes were open, wide and bloodshot, as if it was alive, but unable to scream. I staggered back. No, this isn't real. The whispering turned into laughter. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just crashed through the stalks, ignoring the burning pain as they sliced at my arms and face. The laughter chased me, rising into a chorus of voices, some pleading, others mocking. Something grabbed my ankle. I fell hard, face slamming into the dirt. My flashlight flew from my grasp, rolling into the darkness. The thing crawled toward me. I kicked wildly, screaming as I scrambled backward. My hand found the flashlight and I whipped it toward the figure. The scarecrow loomed over me. Its head twitched, the stitches at its mouth splitting, tearing open. And then, in a voice that wasn't human, that was a chorus of all the voices trapped here before me, it spoke. "Join us," I screamed. The next thing I remember, I was on the side of the road. Mike, Jake, and Lisa found me an hour later, lying in the dirt, shaking. I couldn't tell them what happened. I just gasped, "Leave. Now." They didn't argue. We never spoke about it again. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispering. And I know the scarecrow is waiting for the next fool to enter the cornfield. The thing in the cornfield. I never liked driving past the old cornfield on Holloway Road. It stretched for miles, the stalks taller than any I'd seen, their dry husks whispering in the wind. Something about that place always felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the rows seemed to shift when you weren't looking, or the stories kids told about people vanishing in there, only for their bodies to turn up weeks later, if they turned up at all. I didn't believe in ghost stories, not really. But I knew something was off about that place. So when my car broke down right in front of it, I knew I was screwed. 1. The dashboard lights flickered before the whole car sputtered and died. I coasted to a stop on the shoulder, my pulse ticking up as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine groaned but wouldn't start. Great. Just great. I checked my phone. No service. Of course. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, weighing my options. I could wait for another car to pass by, but this road wasn't exactly busy, especially this late at night. Or I could walk back the way I came, 3 miles to the last gas station I saw. Or I could take the shortcut through the field. I knew there was an old dirt path that cut straight across. It'd save me at least an hour. But the thought of walking into that cornfield alone made my stomach twist. A gust of wind rattled the stalks. They swayed and rustled like they were alive, shifting in slow, deliberate waves. I swallowed hard. No choice. I needed to get home. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the night. 2. The moment I stepped between the rows, the world changed. The air grew thick and still, pressing in on me like a heavy blanket. The sounds of the road faded, swallowed by the rustling corn. I kept my flashlight trained ahead, following the narrow dirt path that snaked through the stalks. My footsteps were too loud. Each snap of a dried husk underfoot sent a spike of unease through me. I walked faster. The deeper I went, the more I felt it, that wrongness. It was subtle at first, just a prickle at the back of my neck, a whisper of unease. But then I started noticing things, like how the corn wasn't swaying anymore. The wind had stopped, completely, and yet I still heard movement, soft shuffling just out of sync with my own steps. I whipped my flashlight to the side. Nothing but endless rows of corn. I kept moving. A minute later, I heard it again, closer this time. A dry, raspy sound. Breathing. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Hello!" Silence. I wasn't alone. I should have turned back. I should have run. But I didn't. Instead, I did something stupid. I stepped off the path. 3. The second I left the trail, the whispers started. Not real whispers, not voices, but the rustling of the corn. it changed. It became sharper, more deliberate, like something was moving through the stalks, circling me. I swept my flashlight in every direction, my pulse hammering. The rows stretched endlessly, identical like a maze designed to trap me. Then snap. A stalk broke somewhere to my left. I jerked the flashlight toward the sound. A figure stood between the rows, half hidden by the corn. I barely saw it, just a glimpse of something tall, thin, its body all wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then it moved. I ran. I didn't think. I just bolted, crashing through the stalks, gasping for breath. The corn slapped at my face, my arms, but I didn't stop. I could hear it behind me, keeping pace, its footsteps impossibly fast, impossibly light. Then I saw it up ahead, clearing. I stumbled into it, nearly falling. It was small, barely 10 feet across, but the moment I stepped inside, the noise stopped. Everything went dead silent. I turned, panting, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The thing stood at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of my light. I couldn't see its face, just its shape, tall and thin, shifting slightly, like it wasn't entirely solid. I took a step back. My foot hit something. I glanced down. A shoe, old, faded, half buried in the dirt. Then I saw the others, scattered around the clearing, shoes, wallets, keys, scraps of torn clothing. My stomach turned. I wasn't the first person to come through here, and none of them had made it out. For the thing moved. It didn't walk. It didn't run. Twitched forward, jerky, like something struggling to fit into the shape of a person. My breath hitched. It lifted one long, twisted arm, pointing at me. And then it smiled. Not with a mouth. It had no mouth, but I felt it smile, deep in my bones. The flashlight flickered. The thing took another step. I bolted. I didn't care where I was going. I just ran. I tore through the corn, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The whispers chased me. Faster. The thing was right behind me, so close I could feel it reaching for me, its fingers brushing the back of my neck. Then light. I burst out of the field and onto the road, nearly collapsing. The headlights of a passing truck blinded me. I turned. The corn was still, silent. The thing was gone, but I knew it was still there, watching, waiting. I staggered to my feet as the truck driver pulled over, yelling if I was okay. I didn't answer. I just stared at the cornfield, because I knew I had barely escaped, and I knew not everyone had been so lucky. 5. I never took Holloway Road again. I never even drove near it. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I still hear the whispers. Whispers in the cornfield. I never should have taken the shortcut. It was a mistake, one I realized too late. The county road I usually took home was closed due to an accident, forcing me to take the long way through the back roads. But then, as I passed an old wooden sign half buried in weeds, I remembered a path that cut straight through an abandoned cornfield. Locals called it Hollis Lot. The name didn't mean much to me, just some old farmland that had been left to rot decades ago. I'd heard the stories growing up. Kids daring each other to enter, whispers of strange disappearances, and some nonsense about the wind carrying voices. But it was just a field, nothing more. I turned onto the dirt path, my tires crunching over gravel and dried husks. The stalks loomed on both sides, impossibly tall, their leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. It should have been a 5-minute detour, but as I drove deeper, an unsettling sensation crept over me. The road was narrowing. The cornstalks were pressing in, their dry, brittle arms stretching toward my truck. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. My headlights barely pierced the dense rows, casting long, flickering shadows that moved like figures standing just beyond the edges of my vision. Then the truck sputtered. I glanced at the fuel gauge, half a tank. There was no reason for it to stall. I twisted the key in the ignition. The engine groaned but refused to turn over. My heart pounded against my ribs as I tried again. Nothing. A whisper. I froze. It was faint, almost lost in the rustling leaves, but distinct. "Help me!" I whipped my head around. The field was empty, just endless rows of corn stretching into the night. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Please, don't leave me here." A shiver ran down my spine. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. No service. Figures. I had two choices. Stay in the truck and wait until morning or try to find help. But help from where? The nearest farmhouse was miles away. I grabbed the flashlight from my glove compartment and stepped out. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation. The moment my boots hit the ground, the whispering stopped. I swept the light over the field. Nothing but rows of withered stalks, their husks split open like gaping mouths. But then, in the distance, I saw something that made my stomach twist into knots. A figure, barely visible in the dark. It stood between the rows, motionless. I took a step forward. "Hello?" My voice came out hoarse. No response. The figure was small. Maybe a child? A girl? The longer I stared, the more I could make out. Pale arms, tangled hair, a dress fluttering in the breeze. "Are you okay?" I called, stepping closer. She lifted her head. Her face, what little I could see, was hollow, her eyes sunken deep into shadowed sockets. Her lips barely moved, but I heard her whisper, clear as day, "Run." A hand clamped onto my shoulder. I spun, my flashlight tumbling to the ground. The stalks around me swayed violently, though the air had gone still. My breath hitched as I scrambled to pick up the light, swinging it wildly. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt. No sign of the girl. But the whispering had returned. Came from all around me now, hundreds of voices overlapping, urgent, desperate. I stumbled backward, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. The whispers rose, swelling into something unnatural, something angry. I bolted toward my truck. The stalks clawed at me as I ran, slicing at my arms and face. The whispering grew louder, almost a scream, a chorus of voices shrieking words I couldn't understand. Then silence. I reached the truck, panting, and yanked open the door. I didn't look back. I didn't care what I had heard or seen. I just wanted out. The truck started on the first try. I floored it, the tires spitting dirt as I sped down the path. My headlights caught glimpses of movement in the corn. Figures shifting, darting between the rows. I refused to slow down. The road widened, the field finally giving way to open land. My house wasn't far. I didn't stop until I was inside, every door locked, every light on. That night, I barely slept. I could still hear the whispers, lingering in my mind like an infection. By morning, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, a trick of the wind, an overactive imagination. Then I checked my truck. Deep in the dirt-caked paint of the driver's side door were scratches. Not random marks. Words. "Don't come back." The harvest curse. I should have never taken the shortcut. That's what keeps replaying in my head, over and over, like some cruel joke the universe played on me. If I just stayed on the highway, I wouldn't be here, writing this, waiting for something I can't escape. It started a few nights ago. I was driving home late from a friend's house, deep in rural Indiana. The roads were empty, the moon barely visible behind thick clouds. My GPS insisted the highway was the fastest route, but I knew another way, a back road that cut through miles of cornfields. No streetlights, no traffic, just an old dirt path that would shave off 20 minutes. So I took it. Half an hour into the drive, my car sputtered, the headlights flickered, and suddenly, the engine died. Just like that. No warning, no strange noises beforehand. It was as if something had reached inside and shut it off. I cursed under my breath, gripping the wheel. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. The silence was deafening. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. Just the endless rows of corn stretching out on both sides of the road. I checked my phone. No signal. That's when I saw it. A house. Not far from the road, nestled between the towering cornstalks, was an old farmhouse. Its windows were dark, its wooden siding cracked and worn from years of neglect. A single porch light flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the overgrown yard. I hesitated. Something about it made my skin crawl. But what choice did I have? Leaving my car, I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the house, my footsteps crunching against the dry soil. Every step I took, the corn seemed to shift, like it was moving around me. By the time I reached the front porch, my gut was screaming at me to turn back. But then I saw the door was already open, just slightly. I knocked anyway. "Hello?" No answer. I pushed the door open wider, the old hinges groaning in protest. Inside, dust covered everything, the furniture, the floor, the walls. It looked like no one had lived there in decades. And yet, the air felt charged, like the house was holding its breath. I stepped inside. The voices in the corn. The floor creaked beneath my weight as I moved through the house, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Faint outlines of furniture loomed in the gloom, covered in white sheets. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Low, almost too quiet to notice. I froze, my breath hitching. It had come from outside, from the corn. I turned slowly toward the window. The stalks were still, unmoving, but the whispering continued. A dozen voices, maybe more, murmuring just beyond my comprehension. Then something shifted in the field. A tall, thin shadow moved between the rows, barely visible in the moonlight. I stumbled back from the window. My pulse pounded in my ears. Nope, I was done. I didn't care if I had to walk 10 miles to the nearest gas station. I was leaving. I turned toward the door and stopped. The front door was closed. I hadn't closed it. The harvestman. A slow, creeping fear slithered up my spine. I took a shaky breath and reached for the knob, but just as my fingers brushed it, I heard something behind me, a rustling sound, like something dragging across the floor. I turned. A figure stood in the hallway, tall, thin. Its body was made of twisted cornstalks, woven together into a grotesque mockery of a man. Its arms were too long, its fingers ending in brittle, jagged twigs. And its face, if you could call it that, was a burlap sack stretched tight, empty eye sockets staring at me. It didn't move. Neither did I. Then it took a step forward. I bolted. I yanked the door open and ran, sprinting toward my car. The cornfield loomed ahead, swallowing the road in darkness. Behind me, I heard it move, a dry, scraping sound, like leaves rustling in the wind. But there was no wind. I reached my car and yanked the door handle. Locked. My shaking hands fumbled in my pockets for the keys. Another step. Closer now. I found the keys and jammed them into the lock, throwing the door open just as I felt something brush against my back. I dove inside and slammed the door shut. Silence. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. I didn't question it. I hit the gas and tore down the road, the corn blurring past me in a golden haze. But in the rearview mirror, I saw something standing at the edge of the field, watching me. The warning. I made it home that night, barely. I told myself I'd imagined it, that exhaustion had messed with my head, that the whispers were just the wind, the shadow just a trick of the light. Then, the next morning, I found something on my porch, a single cornstalk, twisted into the shape of a man. And now, every night, I hear the whispers. They're getting closer. I don't think I have much time left.